They told her never to go up there. Top floor's off limits, the head maid had warned. Especially room 7. That's where the boy is. Don't bother. But that night, something didn't feel right. Naomi was finishing up in the kitchen when she heard it. A sharp, short cry. Not loud, but aching, like someone trying not to cry, but failing. She paused. The others pretended not to hear. Again another sound, a soft thud, then silence. Without thinking, Naomi put down her towel and walked toward the stairs. Each step creaked like it was warning her to turn back, but she didn't. She reached the door with the brass number 7. Something in her chest tightened. She knocked gently, no answer. Then slowly, quietly, she opened the door. There, in the middle of the room, was a boy, maybe 8 or 9, curled up on the floor. He wasn't crying anymore, just rocking back and forth, his eyes fixed on nothing. No toys, no colours, just grey walls and a bed that hadn't been touched. Naomi didn't say anything. She just sat down on the floor, a few feet away, cross-legged, calm. The boy flinched when she moved, so she stayed still. She hummed, softly, not a song, just a sound, a melody with no words. The boy didn't look at her, but he stopped rocking, just a little. She kept humming. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Her legs were stiff, but she didn't move. Then, barely, he shifted closer. His hands still tight in his lap, but his eyes now flicking toward her. That's when the door slammed open. "What are you doing here?" Naomi turned slowly. A tall man in a black coat stood in the doorway, furious. "Mr. Callahan, the boy's father. I told them no one comes in here." Naomi stood up gently. "He sounded scared," she said quietly. Mr. Callahan stared at her, then at his son, now sitting upright, watching them both. Naomi didn't defend herself. She just looked back at the boy and said, "I'm sorry, I just didn't want him to feel alone tonight." There was silence, a long one. Then Mr. Callahan spoke again, this time softer. "He let you sit with him?" Naomi nodded. The man looked confused, almost lost. He glanced back at his son, who was still peaceful in a way he hadn't seen in years. He didn't say thank you or apologise. He just whispered, almost to himself, "Strange." And then, just like that, he closed the door and left. The next morning, Naomi expected a call from the agency. Maybe even someone at the door, asking her to pack her things. She didn't regret going into that room, but she was sure she'd crossed a line. Instead, she was called to the study. The butler's voice was oddly neutral. "Mr. Callahan wants to see you, now." Naomi wiped her hands on her apron and followed. The study was large, full of books that didn't look like they'd been touched in years. Mr. Callahan stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at the garden below. He didn't turn around. "You sat with him," he said. Naomi nodded, even though he wasn't looking at her. "I've hired therapists, specialists, people with degrees longer than their names. He never looked at them, never let them near." She stayed quiet. He turned then, slow, deliberate. His face was tired, but his voice steady. "I want you to stay, not as cleaning staff, as Liam's companion, someone he trusts." Naomi blinked. "I'm not trained for that." "You didn't need training last night," he replied. "And he didn't flinch when you touched the floor." She hesitated. "Why me?" Mr. Callahan paused, then said almost too softly, "Because he was calm, and I haven't seen him calm in 3 years." Naomi's hands fidgeted at her sides. She thought of the boy, curled up on the floor, silent but listening. "I don't know all the right ways to help," she said. "I just know what it feels like to be scared and alone." Mr. Callahan looked at her differently now, less guarded. "I'll double your pay, full room and board, no more cleaning tasks. Your only job is Liam." Naomi didn't answer right away. Something about the way he said, "your only job," made it feel heavier than it sounded. After a moment she said quietly, "I won't fix him. That's not what I do." "I'm not asking you to," he replied. "Just stay." That night, Naomi didn't sleep much. She kept thinking about the boy behind the door, the way he moved just slightly toward her, the way silence didn't feel so empty in that room. By morning, her answer was ready. She walked back into the study, stood tall and said, "I'll stay, but not as a caretaker, just as Naomi." And for the first time, Mr. Callahan gave a small nod. "Then welcome," he said, "to the hardest job in this house." The guest room they gave her was on the same floor as Liam. It was simple, soft sheets, warm light, and a small chair by the window. But Naomi barely noticed any of that. Her eyes kept drifting to the door across the hall. Liam's door. She didn't knock, not yet. Instead, she spent her morning setting up the sitting room with a small table, some blank paper, a few markers, and a box of soft clay she found in the attic. She left the door open. Then she sat and waited. Minutes passed. An hour. Nothing. She was about to get up when she heard the faintest sound, bare feet brushing against carpet. Then a shadow by the doorway. Liam stood there, fingers gripping the edge of the wall, peeking inside. He didn't say a word. Naomi didn't either. She just smiled and picked up a green marker. Slowly she drew a little tree. Just a trunk, a few leaves, nothing big. Then she slid the marker across the table and pushed a blank sheet beside it. No pressure. Just an invitation. Liam watched her for a long time. Then he stepped in. Not much, just 1 foot over the threshold, but to Naomi it felt huge. He sat down, but not at the table. On the floor, near her, close enough to see, far enough to escape. She didn't push. After a while he picked up the blue marker and drew a circle, then a second, then a third. Naomi looked down, eyes warm. "Bubbles?" she asked softly. Liam didn't answer, but his hand kept moving. She smiled. "I like bubbles too." He paused, looked at her for half a second, then kept drawing. Later that day, Mr. Callahan peeked into the room. He didn't speak, didn't walk in. He just saw his son, drawing quietly beside a woman with soft eyes and patient hands. And for the first time in years, he smiled. Not a big smile, just the kind that says, maybe we're okay. That night, Naomi placed the drawing on the fridge. 3 blue circles, a green tree, side by side. She didn't know what it meant exactly, but she knew it meant something, and for now, that was enough. The next afternoon, the sitting room was quiet again. Same paper, same markers, same open door. Naomi sat on the floor this time, sketching a little bird with a bent wing. She wasn't trying to be clever, just drawing what came to mind. Something about imperfection felt honest. Liam walked in without hesitation. No knocking, no pause. He sat at the table today, progress. He picked a brown marker and began making slow lines across the paper. Naomi glanced over. He was drawing what looked like a ladder? She didn't ask. She just smiled. "That's a strong line." He didn't look up, but she saw the corner of his mouth twitch, just a little. Then there was movement behind them. Footsteps, slower, heavier. Mr. Callahan stood at the doorway. He had that same expression, half curious, half unsure, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be there. Naomi looked up and smiled gently. "There's space at the table." He hesitated. She motioned to a chair beside Liam. "It doesn't bite." That got a small exhale from Liam, almost a laugh, almost. Mr. Callahan stepped in, moving like someone walking through fog. He sat down, unsure of his hands, unsure of his eyes. Naomi pushed a paper toward him. "Try something." "I haven't drawn in years," he muttered. "Then your lines will be honest," she replied. After a pause, he picked up a pencil. At first, just a few hesitant strokes. Then slowly a shape formed, a house. Simple, slanted roof, 1 crooked window. Naomi leaned closer. "That where you grew up?" He nodded. "Montana, cold winters, but quiet." Liam glanced at the drawing, then wordlessly reached over and added something. A little green tree right next to the house. Mr. Callahan froze. Naomi didn't say a word, just let the moment breathe. Liam kept drawing, calm, and Mr. Callahan just watched, his eyes softer than before. It wasn't a breakthrough. It wasn't magic. It was just a shared picture, a memory, a small bridge. That night, Naomi placed the new drawing on the fridge, next to the first. 3 blue circles, a green tree, and now, a house. Side by side. No titles, no names. Just proof that healing sometimes looks like pencil lines and silence shared across a table. Naomi had been in the house for 2 weeks now. The silence no longer felt cold, just quiet, like the kind of quiet that listens back. One afternoon, while dusting the hallway, she heard a soft creak. A door barely opened, not Liam's. It was the music room. She peeked in. The piano sat near the window, covered in a pale sheet. Dust outlined the keys like a ghost's fingerprints. She didn't enter, just stood there. Later that evening, over tea, she asked gently, "Does anyone play the piano?" Mr. Callahan looked up, surprised. "Used to," he said, "my wife." Naomi nodded. "Liam watches the room sometimes." He looked away. He hasn't heard it since she passed. Naomi didn't push, but that night she left a small note outside his study. Music doesn't ask us to move on, it just waits until we're ready. The next evening, Naomi was folding laundry upstairs when she heard it. 1 note, then 2, then a whole melody, hesitant, searching like someone remembering how to speak. She walked quietly down the hallway and paused near the music room. Mr. Callahan sat at the piano, shoulders hunched, fingers trembling slightly over the keys. The song was simple, not flawless, but filled with something raw, real. Then another sound, a soft shuffle. Liam was there in the doorway, watching, his eyes wide, his hands still. And then he stepped into the room. slowly, 1 foot at a time. He walked over, didn't say a word, but placed his hand gently on the piano's edge. Mr. Callahan kept playing. Naomi didn't move, didn't speak. She just stood back, watching father and son fill a room once left untouched by grief. When the final note faded, Liam tapped 2 fingers on the piano lid, twice. It wasn't a word, but it was something. Recognition, memory, maybe even love. Mr. Callahan looked at him, blinking fast. He whispered, "She used to play that for you at bedtime." Liam didn't answer, but he stayed, and that was answer enough. That night, Naomi returned to the kitchen and found a drawing taped on the fridge. A piano, 3 stick figures beside it, and above them a heart. No words, just understanding, and maybe, just maybe, healing. The doorbell rang on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. Naomi dried her hands and went to answer it. Standing there, umbrella in hand, polished smile in place, was a woman in a beige trench coat. Tall, elegant, the kind who looked like she hadn't been rained on in years. "Hi," she said brightly. "I'm Evelyn, old friend of Preston's. Is he home?" Naomi stepped back. "I'll let him know you're here." Evelyn walked in without waiting. She looked around the house, eyes scanning the walls, the furniture, the worn corners with just a touch too much curiosity. "Looks different," she murmured. "Less sharp." Naomi stayed quiet. When Mr. Callahan came downstairs, his face shifted. Not angry, just tired. "Evelyn," he said, "didn't know you were back in town." She smiled. "Saw the article about the boy. Thought I'd check in." Naomi's chest tightened. The article. She hadn't known anyone outside had seen it. They sat in the lounge. Naomi brought tea, then started to leave, but paused when she heard Evelyn speak. "She's the maid, right?" Evelyn's voice was smooth, too smooth. "Interesting how much she's involved." Mr. Callahan didn't flinch. "Her name is Naomi." Evelyn tilted her head. "Of course, I'm sure she means well." Then looking straight at Naomi. "Still, it must be confusing, crossing lines like that. Doesn't it make things messy?" Naomi didn't answer, but she didn't shrink either. She looked Evelyn in the eye and said gently, "Sometimes when something's messy, it just means someone stayed long enough to care." The silence that followed was loud. Evelyn blinked, smiled tight. "Well, this house always did like a little drama." She didn't stay long after that. When the door closed behind her, Naomi let out a breath she hadn't realised she was holding. Mr. Callahan stood still for a moment, then turned to her. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to be," Naomi said. But he shook his head. "You've done more for this family than half the people who've judged it." She gave a small smile. "Then let them talk." He looked at her, really looked, and said, "They will." Then added, more quietly, "But I won't let them change what we're building here." That night, Liam drew another picture. It showed 3 figures again, Naomi, Mr. Callahan, and him. But this time, they were standing in front of a house. Above them were grey clouds. And still, they were smiling. It started with a search for blankets. The nights had grown colder, and Naomi wanted to make sure Liam had something extra for his bed. She checked the hallway closet, then the guest room. Finally, she found an old linen chest in the master bedroom's walk-in. She opened it carefully. At first, just folded quilts, faint lavender scent. But under them, a wooden box, heavy, untouched for years. Naomi hesitated. She didn't mean to pry. But when she lifted the lid, a quiet wave of emotion rolled through her chest. Inside were drawings, hundreds of them, all Liam's. Some on scrap paper, some creased, some torn at the edges, but all of them alive. Colours swirling, shapes bold, a world only he could see and used to share. And then at the very bottom, a photo. A woman holding a toddler. Her hair was tied back, her smile soft but full. Naomi didn't need to ask who she was. Emma Callahan, Liam's mother. She set the photo down slowly and sat beside the chest. When Mr. Callahan came in, he paused at the doorway. His face changed, just a little. "You found the box," he said. "I'm sorry," Naomi whispered. "I wasn't trying to..." He shook his head, walked over, sat on the floor beside her. "I packed it away after the funeral," he said. "Couldn't look at it." Naomi ran her finger gently along the edge of one of the drawings. "But he was speaking to you, even then." Mr. Callahan's voice cracked. "I didn't know how to listen." There was silence, but not a harsh one, just the kind that holds truth. "I thought if I locked away the memories," he said, "maybe it would hurt less." Naomi looked at him, soft and steady. "Hiding love doesn't make grief smaller, it just makes it lonelier." He breathed in deep, closed his eyes for a moment. "You always say things like that." "Like what?" "Like someone who's been through the fire and decided to stay kind anyway." Naomi gave a small, tired smile. "That's the only way I made it through." Just then, footsteps. Liam stood in the doorway. He looked at them, then at the open box. He walked over, reached in, and pulled out a single drawing. It was faded, but you could still see it clearly. A woman playing piano, a boy sitting by her side. Liam held it up to his father. Mr. Callahan took it with trembling hands. "That's her," he whispered. Liam didn't speak, but he leaned in, resting his head lightly against his father's arm. And in that small gesture, something long buried rose back up. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. That night, the drawing went up on the fridge too, right in the centre, and for the first time, the house felt like it had a heartbeat again. The letter came on a Thursday. A plain white envelope on the front porch, no return address. Inside was a typed notice, Child Protective Services. An anonymous report had been filed. Claims of neglect, emotional instability, unfit guardianship. Mr. Callahan stood frozen, reading it. Naomi watched his face go pale, his hands clench, and his breath slow into something hollow. Liam walked into the room just then, his fingers stained with marker ink, holding a half-finished drawing. Naomi took the letter gently from Mr. Callahan's hand. "Let me handle this," she said quietly. He didn't argue, he just nodded, like someone who no longer had words. That afternoon they met with a caseworker named Mrs. Delaney. She was kind but distant, clipboard in hand, voice neutral. She spoke mostly to Naomi, which surprised her. "Are you the boy's guardian?" "No," Naomi said, "but I care for him. Every day." Mrs. Delaney scanned her paper. "You're not family, not licensed, not assigned." Naomi looked her in the eye. "No, but I'm trusted." She gestured towards the living room, where Liam sat with his drawing. "He doesn't speak to many, but he lets me sit near him, he lets me hear his silence." The caseworker blinked. Mr. Callahan finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "I've made mistakes, a lot of them, but I've never let anyone hurt my son, and I won't let this system undo everything we've fought to rebuild." Mrs. Delaney jotted a note. Naomi leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but firm. "Whoever sent that letter, they don't know him. Not really. They don't know that he used to sleep with his shoes on, afraid of the dark. They don't know that he drew his mother's smile by memory, even when he couldn't say her name." Her voice caught. "But I do. I know what peace looks like in this house now. It's in the music that plays again. It's in the way he reaches for his father's hand. It's in the fridge full of drawings." The caseworker said nothing at first. Then quietly, "I see that." Before leaving, she knelt in front of Liam and asked softly, "Do you feel safe here?" Liam didn't speak, but he stood up, walked to the fridge, and pointed to the drawing with the piano, then to the house, then to Naomi, and finally he pointed to his own heart. It was the only answer she needed. That night, Naomi sat on the porch with Mr. Callahan. "Do you think we're okay?" he asked. She looked up at the stars. "We're not perfect, but we're honest, and we're trying. That counts for more than most people ever give." The story wasn't supposed to spread, but it did. First, it was just the therapist, who shared a quiet word with a colleague. Then it was a school administrator, asking about the drawings Liam had submitted. And then a reporter called. Naomi answered the phone. "We heard about a boy," the voice said, "who hadn't spoken in years, who now plays piano, who draws joy, who trusts again." She said nothing at first. The voice continued, softer now. "We'd like to share the story of the family that helped him find his way back." Naomi hung up, heart racing. That evening she told Mr. Callahan. He was quiet for a long time. "We're not ready for that kind of attention," he said. "I agree," Naomi said gently, "but I think Liam is stronger than we realise." The next morning a package arrived. Inside, a framed copy of one of Liam's drawings, from the therapist's office, with a handwritten note. "Your boy gave us hope. His silence taught us more than words ever could." Mr. Callahan stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, he walked to the living room and placed the frame on the mantel. When Liam came home, he saw it. He didn't ask who sent it. He just smiled, a full smile, no twitch, no fear. And then, he did something he hadn't done in years. He picked up the house phone, dialed, and when the voice on the other end answered, he said, clearly, softly, "Hi, Grandma." Naomi froze. Mr. Callahan looked like he might fall to his knees. That single word, spoken without a script, without prompt, was enough to undo every fear they'd ever had about what if he never. That night, Naomi wrote a journal entry, just for herself. Love doesn't always need a microphone, but when it's real, it finds its own way to be heard. The next morning, she found Liam's latest drawing on the table. It showed 3 people. One was at a piano, one holding a phone, one standing in the doorway. Above them, the words, "We're still learning, but we're okay." Spring came late that year. The kind of spring that doesn't announce itself, but arrives in the little things. Open windows, warm breeze, a bird's song just loud enough to notice. And in the Callahan house, something else opened too. The front door. It had been closed to visitors for years. Now, Naomi left it open some mornings, letting in the sunlight, letting the world see that the silence inside had changed. One Saturday, Liam stood by the piano drawing something new. Mr. Callahan had started playing again, not often and never perfectly, but enough. Naomi watched them from the kitchen, her hands still in dishwater, her heart full in a way she hadn't felt in years. She didn't need to be told she was family now. It was in the way Liam handed her his drawings first, in the way Mr. Callahan asked her to stay a little longer after dinner, in the way this house no longer echoed. That afternoon, a small group came by, neighbours, a local teacher, even the therapist. They didn't come for a party, they just came to sit, to see what had changed, to witness quiet hope, alive and breathing. Someone brought a cake, someone else brought a plant. Liam brought his sketchbook and sat in the middle of the living room, humming. Naomi sat beside him and he leaned his head on her shoulder. No one said much. They didn't have to. Because healing doesn't always make noise. It just fills the spaces where hurt used to live. That evening, after everyone had gone, Mr. Callahan stood in the hallway, holding an old photo of Emma. "I think she'd like what we've made here," he said quietly. Naomi smiled. "I think she'd be proud." He nodded, eyes soft. "I don't think I knew how to be a father until I learned how to let people in." Naomi looked around, the piano, the framed drawings, the empty teacups still on the table. "You didn't just let people in," she said. "You built something new with them." That night, Liam placed one last drawing on the fridge. It showed the same house, but this time there was music in the windows. And over the roof, in big clear letters, "We're not broken, we're just becoming. Thank you for staying with this story until the end." It wasn't a loud story, but sometimes the quiet ones stay with us the longest. Watching how Liam, Naomi and Mr. Callahan found their way, not through perfection, but through patience, kindness and shared silence, reminded me that healing doesn't have to look big to be real. Sometimes love is just a door left open, a seat kept warm, a house that learns how to breathe again, and maybe that's enough. If this story touched you too, even in a small way, I'm really grateful. Thank you for being here. Take care of your heart, and I hope to see you again in the next story on Rain Inside.